I'm begging you, take one of them. Desperate, she offered one of her daughters. But the millionaire. In bustling New York, a millionaire attorney believed he had every part of his life under control until the moment he walked out of work and was stopped by a desperate young mother. With two babies clutched tightly in her arms, she made an unthinkable choice: to hand one of her daughters to a complete stranger. From that instant on, Nicholas Grant's life was turned upside down. What began as an impulsive act became a bond that could never be broken. And living under the same roof opened the door to something far greater than either of them could have ever imagined. This is a powerful story about choices, courage, and the true meaning of family, one that will move you from beginning to end. Subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Nicholas Grant was wrapping up one of the most exhausting nights of the week. The Manhattan law firm where he worked was still lit past 10, stacks of case files covering every inch of his desk. He was used to that pace deadlines, high-profile clients, and a schedule that left no room for anything beyond work. Adjusting his dark suit jacket, he stepped out of the glass building onto the busy sidewalk, expecting nothing more than the usual line of cabs and the sound of horns cutting through the night. But what he saw stopped him cold. Standing under the harsh city lights was a woman in worn-out clothes, her face drawn with exhaustion, holding two infants, one in each arm. The contrast between the city's cold brightness and the fragility of that image made Nicholas freeze where he was. He thought about walking past, but her eyes locked on his, pleading without words, and before he could react, she stepped closer. Marissa Lane moved unsteadily, each step weighted down by fatigue. Her disheveled hair clung to her damp face, her arms trembling as she clutched the two little girls, who looked no older than 9 months. One whimpered softly against her mother's shoulder, while the other stared with dark, wide eyes, taking everything in. Marissa's voice came out hoarse, a whisper that carried the force of a command and a plea at once. "Please, take one of them." "I can't do this anymore," Nicholas blinked, certain he had misheard. He assumed it was some kind of mistake, maybe a request for money, another story he had been told too many times on New York streets. But it wasn't money. She extended one of the babies toward him, as if she were handing over her entire life in a single moment. His pulse raced, torn between disbelief and suspicion that this might be some kind of trap. "Excuse me." "What?" he asked, forcing himself to stay composed. Marissa held one daughter tight while pushing the other gently toward him. "I said, take one. I can't raise both." The raw desperation in her voice tore through every rational defense Nicholas tried to summon. He glanced around. The street was nearly empty, only a few cars passing, no one paying attention. "If it's money, I can," he began, but she cut him off with brutal honesty. "It's not about money. I can't do it. They cry all the time. I don't have milk. I don't have anywhere to go. If I keep both, I'll lose both. At least this way, one of them has a chance." Nicholas swallowed hard, each word sinking deeper. It didn't feel like a scam. The pain in her voice was too real, her tears too raw. He fought to hold his ground. "You're out of your mind. I can't take a child that isn't mine." But Marissa didn't back down. "Yes, you can. I saw you last week helping that boy who fell off his bike. You stayed until his parents came. You're a good man. I know you can give her what I never will." Nicholas vaguely remembered that moment, a kid crying on the sidewalk, him kneeling down to comfort the boy until the parents showed up. It had taken maybe 5 minutes out of his day. He never imagined that simple act would become the reason behind something so unthinkable. "That doesn't mean anything. I don't know the first thing about babies," he argued. Marissa held out the calmer of the two girls, whose gaze was fixed and curious. "This one's easier. Her name's Chloe. She'd be better off with you. Nicholas felt the child stare on him steady, far too knowing for someone so small. His body reacted before his mind could stop it. He extended his hand, and the tiny fingers wrapped tightly around his, stronger than he expected. He froze. You can't just hand a baby to a stranger on the street, he whispered, his voice unsteady. But Marissa was already crying openly. I have no choice. If I keep them both, they won't survive. At least this way, one will. Her name's Chloe. The other is Hannah. Nicholas tried to protest, but before he knew it, Marissa had placed the child in his arms. The warmth, the weight so much lighter than he imagined, the rapid little breaths. Chloe felt fragile, yet somehow steady against him. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, as if accepting this stranger without question. Nicholas stepped forward, desperate for answers. Wait, at least tell me your name. The woman was already retreating quickly, clutching the other baby to her chest. Marissa, she called over her shoulder, already moving toward the corner. And you don't need to know anything else. Just take care of her. His heart pounded as he shouted after her. Marissa, wait. How am I supposed to? But the words fell away. She was gone, running into the shadows with Hannah. Nicholas stood frozen in front of the building, holding Chloe tight against him, the city noise clashing with the girl's calm breathing. He looked down at her, then at the glowing office lobby behind him, then back at the empty street. Now what? He muttered under his breath, not sure if he was speaking to himself or to her. Chloe yawned softly, almost as if answering him. And in that moment, Nicholas knew nothing in his life would ever be the same. Nicholas stepped into the lobby, still in shock. Chloe pressed tightly against him like something so fragile it could break at the slightest mistake. The doorman gave him a strange look, but Nicholas offered no explanation. He moved the elevator up, unlocked his apartment door, and stood frozen in the hallway, uncertain of his next move. The space, usually immaculate, cold, and silent, now felt invaded by the tiny girl wiggling her hands with curious interest. There was no crib, no bottles, nothing remotely connected to a baby's world. He placed Chloe carefully on the sofa, surrounding her with cushions to keep her safe, and hurried to the bedroom in search of blankets. When he returned, his chest clenched. She had managed to roll onto her side and was seconds away from slipping off. No, 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 he muttered in panic, scooping her back into his arms. The clock on the wall ticked toward 11, and Nicholas realized the night was going to be long. Chloe's cries pierced the apartment, loud and insistent. He tried pacing the floor, rocking her in his arms, but it did nothing. He hummed a tune without thinking, his voice breaking, and the wailing only grew. Desperation pushed him to set her down for a moment, safe between pillows, and dash into the kitchen. He tore through cupboards and the refrigerator, searching for anything useful, only to find water, coffee, and nothing else. Balancing Chloe awkwardly against his chest, he grabbed his phone and called the corner pharmacy, stumbling over his words as he begged for formula, bottles, diapers, anything they could deliver. The clerk on the other end asked if it was for his first child. Something like that, Nicholas answered breathlessly. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang, and he paid without hesitation, grabbing the bags and rushing back inside, Chloe still clinging to him. Her sobs echoed off the walls, her little face flushed, eyes squeezed shut as she hiccuped through her cries. He dropped the bags on the table, but never loosened his hold on her. With one arm locked around her tiny body, he ripped open plastic packaging with the other, boxes tumbling to the floor. It's okay. Everything's fine, he whispered, the words more for himself than for her. He fumbled with a bottle, scooping formula with shaking hands, spilling half of it on the counter. Heating it with one hand while holding her with the other proved impossible, and when he finally tried to feed her, the temperature was off. Chloe turned her head, rejecting it. He tried again, failed again. He even attempted to change her diaper, clumsy and awkward, though he realized she didn't need it. Her cries intensified and sweat dampened his forehead. He began circling the room, bouncing her desperately, until a tune from his childhood surfaced uninvited. He hummed softly, unsteady at first, then steadier, and slowly her cries waned. Chloe nestled her face against his chest, her breathing evening out, and Nicholas let out a long, shaky breath as relief washed over him. That relief didn't last long. Minutes later, Chloe spit up all over his shirt. Nicholas froze, then exhaled hard, pulling the soiled fabric over his head while keeping her balanced in one arm. He wiped her face gently with one of the claws from the pharmacy, improvising movements guided only by instinct. Changing into a fresh shirt, he lowered himself into the armchair, Chloe resting against his shoulder. She was calm now, her breathing soft and even, but Nicholas dared not move a muscle. His whole body remained tense, terrified that any shift might wake her again. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside distant cars, a honking horn while inside. His world had stopped. The hours crawled by. Nicholas drifted in and out, never fully asleep. Chloe woke in short bursts, crying again, pulling his attention each time. Between shaky attempts at mixing formula and clumsy rocking, he began to notice patterns. She quieted when pressed against the warmth of his chest. She stilled when he spoke, listening with curious silence. And she clutched his finger with surprising strength, as if anchoring herself to him. None of it gave him certainty, but those small discoveries kept him from collapsing. When dawn finally filtered through the curtains, Nicholas sat slouched in the armchair, exhausted. Chloe sprawled across his chest in peaceful sleep. A few hours later, his phone shattered the fragile quiet. The insistent ringing pulled him back to the present. He answered hoarsely, recognizing his secretary's voice. It was Marcia, calling back after the strange message he'd left. He asked her for help, his words blunt and heavy. He needed someone who could care for a baby. She paused in shock. A baby? You never told me anything about a baby. Nicholas sidestepped her questions, unwilling to explain. He just needed a solution. She promised to contact a trusted woman named Carmen, though not until later in the day. He thanked her and hung up, staring down at Chloe still asleep against him. Somehow, he had made it through the night without preparation, without knowledge, without a plan. What he did have now was something new, something that already reshaped how he saw his apartment, his routine, and maybe even himself. Nicholas opened the apartment door still in his pajamas, eyes heavy and stubble darkening his jaw. Standing outside was Carmen, the woman his secretary had recommended. She carried a worn canvas bag on her shoulder and wore the steady expression of someone who had seen it all before. Nicholas stepped aside to let her in, leading her to the living room, where Chloe lay on a makeshift blanket on the rug. She cried all night, he admitted, his voice rough with exhaustion. Carmen didn't scold or question him. She simply picked the baby up, cradled her with practiced ease, and began rocking her in smooth, confident motions. Within minutes, the crying stopped. How old is she? Carmen asked, studying the baby's size. Nicholas hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck, ashamed to admit he didn't know. 9 months, maybe 10? He guessed. Her brows shot up. Maybe. She's not your daughter. He looked away, mumbling that the situation was complicated, then asked her to watch the baby while he went to clean up. The following days were a blur of adjustments. Nicholas scrambled to balance his demanding work life with the new responsibility he had stumbled into. Mornings began with him gulping down coffee while Chloe sat in a stroller by the table. Before leaving for the office, he spent nearly an hour trying to feed her, play with her, or simply coax a laugh. At lunchtime, he would rush back to check in, his once unshakable routine now revolving around the baby. Carmen handled the essentials with calm authority, though she occasionally asked questions Nicholas wasn't ready to answer. Still, he couldn't deny how much Chloe's presence changed the atmosphere of his home. The once sterile apartment now carried the scent of warm formula, toys scattered across the floor, and the occasional burst of laughter. But with that change came whispers in the hallways. Neighbors wondered where the baby had come from. Our reserved bachelor suddenly had a child under his roof. The rumors escalated after one neighbor claimed to have seen a woman at the front desk, frantic and asking for Nicholas by name, insisting she was the baby's mother. The gossip spread quickly, eventually reaching the attention of social services. That Friday afternoon, 2 caseworkers knocked at his door. Nicholas, with Chloe in his arms, invited them into the living room, his heart pounding. They didn't waste time. They asked directly where the child had come from. He drew in a breath and told them everything. He described a late-night encounter outside his office, the desperate mother, the impulsive decision to take the baby, and the chaos of learning on the fly how to care for her. He admitted his lack of preparation, but insisted he had done everything possible since then to give her safety and stability. The caseworkers scribbled notes silently, exchanging looks that only heightened his unease. Before leaving, they made it clear. The situation was irregular, and there would have to be a hearing with the mother present. The following Tuesday, Nicholas walked through the courthouse with Chloe pressed against him, the echo of his footsteps bouncing off marble walls that felt as cold as the weight in his chest. Across the courtroom, he saw Marissa sitting with Hannah, her shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. The judge wasted no time. "Ms. Lane, why did you hand your child to a stranger?" Marissa hesitated, then slowly raised her gaze. "Because I knew he was a good man. I saw him help a child on the street when he didn't have to. I couldn't imagine anyone better to take care of my daughter." Nicholas shifted in his seat, stunned. He hadn't realized that one fleeting moment weeks ago, a boy with a scraped knee and a few minutes of kindness had left such an impression. The room fell quiet as the judge made notes, her expression unreadable. When it was his turn, the judge was just as blunt. "Mr. Grant, why did you accept this child?" Nicholas adjusted Chloe in his arms as her small fingers tugged at the sleeve of his suit. "I can't explain it logically," he said quietly. "She was desperate. And when I held the baby, she just looked at me. Calm, steady. I couldn't hand her back. It felt like the only thing I could do." The words weren't rehearsed, but they rang with sincerity, filling the courtroom with a silence heavier than any argument he had ever made in his career. The judge studied him, eyes sharp, as if searching for cracks, but found only conviction. She made a few final notes, then spoke firmly. "These girls are sisters. They must not be separated. Their mother needs support, and you, Mr. Grant, have the resources to provide it. Therefore, I am ordering a temporary arrangement. Ms. Lane and both her daughters will reside with you under monthly supervision. The situation will be reviewed in 6 months." Nicholas left the courthouse dazed, the echo of footsteps in the long corridors pounding like the final toll of a bell. Marissa walked beside him, head bowed, clutching Hannah to her chest. Chloe tugged at the buttons of his shirt, blissfully unaware of the weight of the decision. They didn't say much on the way out, just shared a silence that said more than words. Nicholas looked at the 2 girls, then at Marissa, and felt the enormity of what lay ahead. Until that day, he had treated everything as temporary, an odd twist of fate he was improvising his way through. But now there was no doubt. This wasn't just about a baby left in his arms. That night, he would return home with not 1, but 2 little girls and their mother. A family he had never planned for, but one that was about to take shape under his roof. On the very first night after the hearing, Nicholas's apartment already felt transformed. Until then, the wide, luxurious space in Manhattan had been nothing more than a meticulously organized, silent refuge that mirrored his solitary life. Now, small suitcases lined the hallway. Baby clothes lay folded over chairs, and the bedroom next to his had a crib already set up, one that until then had only belonged to Chloe. Because everything had happened so quickly, he hadn't had time to buy another crib. So that night, the twins shared the same space, lying side by side while Marissa stayed in the same room, alert to their every movement. Their alternating cries filled the air like a chaotic symphony, broken only by quiet moments when the girls calmed simply by touching each other. Nicholas stood in the doorway, unsure of his place, yet unable to look away from the undeniable bond between them. Marissa murmured softly, almost to herself, "They can't stand being apart." He didn't respond, but her words lingered in his mind. The routine that took shape over the following days was nothing short of chaotic, even with Carmen, the nanny he had hired, in the picture. Nicholas woke early, still trying to cling to his rigid work habits, but his mornings were constantly interrupted by cries, late bottles, or diapers that needed changing. Carmen split her attention between the girls with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before, but even she couldn't manage everything. Marissa shouldered much of the load, preparing simple meals, folding tiny clothes, and organizing details Nicholas had never noticed about his own home. He often caught himself observing the stark difference between the two women. Carmen, disciplined and methodical. Marissa, instinctive and improvisational. Even so, with 3 adults under one roof, the apartment was never quiet. Nicholas tried to remain focused on his work, but it was impossible to ignore the new reality that had permanently settled within his walls. In those first days, conversations between Nicholas and Marissa were short, almost exclusively practical. She would thank him for small gestures, like having a bottle ready in his hand, and he'd respond with nothing more than a nod. They respected one another, but there was a barrier neither dared to cross. At night, they often crossed paths in the kitchen, usually with one of the babies in their arms, trading a few words paired with glances that never lingered. Carmen seemed to sense the quiet tension between them, but chose not to comment. She limited herself to caring for Chloe and Hannah with the calm of someone who'd already seen countless families weather transitional storms. Still, Nicholas couldn't help but notice that his apartment no longer resembled the place he had once known. As the weeks passed, however, the adjustment began to take on a new shape. Nicholas, who had always cultivated cold and formal environments, found himself smiling at the most unlikely things. Chloe crawling after a colorful ball, Hannah giggling at Marissa's exaggerated faces, or the two of them drifting off to sleep at nearly the same moment in their identical cribs, side by side in the room he had prepared for them. He learned to hold both girls at once, one on each arm, to improvise lullabies that seemed to work, and even to make bottles without botching the temperature. He never mentioned it aloud, but in silence, he admitted that each small act was teaching him not only about babies, but about himself. Marissa, in turn, began to trust him more, allowing herself to rest for a few minutes while Nicholas sat on the living room floor, playing with her daughters as though that scene had always belonged to his life. It was during this fragile adjustment that the first shadow of Marissa's past returned to threaten their new rhythm. One Saturday morning, the intercom rang. The doorman informed them that a man was downstairs asking for her. Marissa turned pale, quickly handed Hannah to Carmen, and rushed to the elevator. Uneasy, Nicholas went to the window and caught a glimpse of the scene outside. A tall, lean man with a hard expression and aggressive gestures was arguing with her, standing far too close. Nicholas's body tensed. He left the girls in Carmen's care, hurried downstairs, and positioned himself beside Marissa. The man shot him a look of disdain, sizing him up before spitting out provocatively, "And who's this? Your new protector?" Nicholas didn't flinch. "My name is Nicholas Grant," he answered evenly, his tone firm. "And you need to leave right now." The man laughed bitterly, though his stance made the threat clear. "I'm their father. I have the right to see my daughters," he barked, stepping closer. Nicholas didn't move an inch. "You lost that right the moment you raised your hand against their mother." Marissa's eyes widened, startled by Nicholas's bluntness. The man Mark Wilson took another step forward, but Nicholas calmly pulled out his phone, dialing the police in front of him. "You have 10 seconds to get out of here." The silence that followed was taut, heavy. Mark finally backed away, muttering threats under his breath. "This isn't over." Marissa trembled, tears streaking down her face, while Nicholas guided her back inside. Carmen shut the door firmly behind them. No words were needed. Both knew this wouldn't be the last encounter. That night, once Chloe and Hannah had finally fallen asleep, Nicholas found Marissa sitting in the kitchen, her face buried in her hands. Between sobs, she confessed that she had fled because Mark had begun talking about selling the girls. The thought of them treated like merchandise had driven her into a panic, forcing her to run in the middle of the night, surviving in shelters and on the streets until the night she crossed paths with Nicholas. He listened in silence, each word weighing heavier than the last. When she finally lifted her red, swollen eyes and whispered, "He always comes back." "You won't be able to stop him." Nicholas met her gaze and answered with quiet conviction. "As long as you're under this roof, he won't get near you." It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was a clear decision. In that apartment, Chloe, Hannah, and Marissa were safe. And it was there, in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, that an unlikely family began to take on the shape of something real. The weeks that followed showed Nicholas a daily life he had never pictured for himself. The apartment, once dominated by silence and strict order, now overflowed with the sounds of babies, toys scattered across the floor, and tiny clothes hanging to dry. Carmen kept a careful routine with Chloe and Hannah, sharing the workload with Marissa, but it was impossible for Nicholas not to be pulled into this new reality. He could no longer hide in his office and let life unfold around him. Many mornings, he was the one giving the first bottle, still in his loosened tie, before running off to a meeting. He found himself returning home in the middle of the day just to watch the girls crawl across the rug or laugh at little things that only made sense in their world. His professional life, which had always consumed all his time, was now bending to the constant presence of the twins and Marissa, leaving him torn between surprise and a strange, quiet satisfaction. Marissa was changing too. At first, she had focused solely on her daughters, carefully avoiding any contact with Nicholas beyond the necessary. But over time, short comments began to slip into their shared spaces, the kitchen at mealtimes, late evenings after Carmen left simple observations about the girls, remarks about the city, even shy laughter at something funny that had happened. She had found work at a nearby sewing shop, which gave her a sense of rebuilding her own life. Yet she still leaned on the stability Nicholas provided. He noticed how fiercely she dedicated herself to her daughters, and how that maternal devotion, even shaped by a painful past, gave Chloe and Hannah a security no luxury could replace. Some nights, Nicholas sat in his office armchair listening to muffled laughter drifting from the children's room. When he peeked through the door, left ajar, he often found Marissa on the floor, playing with the twins. For those moments, he forgot how improbable their paths had been. Watching her with the girls, he couldn't help but think that maybe this was what had been missing from his life all along. He never said it aloud. He just lingered in silence, then stepped away quietly. What Marissa didn't realize was that Nicholas had become part of her daughter's everyday memories, and that bond was already forming into something no one else could undo. While life inside the apartment fell into this unexpected rhythm, the shadow of Mark still lingered in Marissa's thoughts. She avoided mentioning her ex, but Nicholas noticed how her shoulders stiffened every time the intercom rang. To strengthen security, he hired extra surveillance for the building and rearranged his schedule to work from home more often. Officially, he explained it as needing flexibility for his clients, but the truth was, he wanted to stay close. He never voiced it, but the fear of Mark returning followed him daily. In a way, that shared fear brought them closer. Marissa began to realize Nicholas wasn't just a wealthy man who had taken her daughters in. He was determined to protect them. That realization created an invisible thread between them, unnamed but undeniable dot. It was in the midst of this fragile balance that the letter arrived. One rainy morning, as Nicholas worked at the dining table and Marissa prepared coffee, the mail brought an envelope stamped with the court seal. Opening it, Nicholas felt his stomach tighten. The date had been set, the final hearing that would determine the girl's future. He handed the paper to Marissa, who froze mid-motion, the spoon suspended in the air. "What if they decide we can't keep them?" she whispered. Nicholas tried to reassure her, reminding her that Chloe and Hannah were well cared for, that their home was stable, that she now had a job, and that nothing justified taking them away. But beneath the reassurances, both of them knew the decision lay beyond their control, and the uncertainty spread like a shadow neither could shake. The night before the hearing, Nicholas barely slept. He paced the apartment, checked the cribs, straightened the toys, as though each detail might stand as evidence of the care the girls received. He found Marissa awake in the living room, Hannah in her arms while Chloe slept soundly. Her face showed deep worry, but also a kind of resignation. "If they think it's better to place them somewhere else, I won't be able to fight it," she said softly. Nicholas knelt in front of her, his voice steady. "That won't happen. I'll be there with you." Marissa lifted her eyes, startled by his certainty, and for a moment, the only sound between them was the steady breathing of the two little girls. The weight of what lay ahead tied them together in a way neither had expected. The day of the hearing dawned gray, the city covered by a heavy sky that seemed to mirror the weight in Nicholas and Marissa's hearts. They arrived at the courthouse early, each holding one of the girls. Chloe was restless, chewing on the sleeve of her dress, while Hannah slept peacefully in her mother's arms. The corridor was cold, filled with hurried footsteps and voices blending into murmurs. Nicholas kept a serious posture, but inside he felt an anxiety he hadn't known even during the most decisive trials of his career. Marissa walked silently beside him, her face tense, unable to hide her fear. When their names were called, they entered the courtroom together, and Nicholas realized how much his life had changed. He was no longer there as a lawyer, but as someone fighting for something priceless. The judge opened the session by reading the social worker's report. The words were objective, yet heavy with meaning. Satisfactory progress. Healthy children. Mother with stable employment. Adequate housing. Nicholas studied Marissa's expression as each point was listed, catching fleeting glimpses of relief in her eyes. When asked to speak, she stepped forward. "I feel grateful and ready. Ready to care for my daughters, even on my own if I have to." The room fell silent, and Nicholas's chest tightened, as though that statement had pushed him out of the equation. The judge then turned to him. "Mr. Grant, are you still willing to help, even knowing you have no legal obligation?" He drew in a deep breath, feeling the weight of sleepless nights, hastily prepared bottles, and cries soothed in the dark, and answered with conviction. "This isn't about obligation. These girls are part of my life now." The silence that followed was different. No judgment, only the awareness that his words came from someplace deep. Chloe, oblivious to everything, reached for the pen dangling from the judge's desk, while Hannah, nestled in Marissa's arms, breathed softly in her sleep. Adjusting her glasses, the judge continued. "The children should not be separated, and the mother has shown clear progress in her ability to care for them. As for you, It is evident you already play an essential role in this family. Therefore, I declare that custody will remain permanently with the biological mother, and I see no need for further social oversight." The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, and Nicholas and Marissa exchanged a look. The girl's future was secured. The decision was final. Outside the courthouse, the moment felt surreal. People hurried past, indifferent, while for them, everything moved in slow motion. Marissa adjusted Hannah in the stroller and said quietly, "I can go back to my sister's place." She said there's a small room for the girls. Nicholas swallowed hard, unable to mask his discomfort. "Is that what you want?" She hesitated, her eyes glistening. "It's the right thing. You've done enough for us. You can't take care of us forever." Chloe began to cry, as if sensing the tension in the air. Marissa tried to soothe her, but the little girl stretched her arms toward Nicholas. The moment he lifted her, the crying stopped instantly. Marissa watched in silence before whispering, "It'll be hard at first, but she'll forget." Nicholas looked at Chloe, then at Hannah, and finally at Marissa. His voice was low but steady. "What if I don't want them to forget? What if I want you to stay?" Marissa's eyes widened in surprise. "Stay as guests?" He drew a long breath, searching for the right words. "Not as guests. I can't imagine this home without them anymore. Or without you. You're already part of my family. It may seem unexpected, maybe even rushed to you, but I don't see you only as their mother anymore. I see you as someone I want here, by my side, for real." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant noise of the street. Tears streamed down Marissa's face as she whispered, "I'm afraid this is just gratitude." Nicholas clasped her hand firmly. "It's not. It's choice. It's feeling." 6 months later, Nicholas stood at the registry office, signing the adoption papers. The clerk read aloud, "Chloe Lane Grant and Hannah Lane Grant." Marissa stood beside him, holding the girls with tears brimming in her eyes. Nicholas smiled when he saw her last name kept alongside his. "Modern family," the clerk remarked, stamping the documents. Outside, the sunlight spilled onto the sidewalk as they walked together. Nicholas's apartment, once defined by rigid order, had become a vibrant home, filled with drawings taped to the fridge, toys scattered across the floor, and laughter echoing through every room. That night, when Marissa, curled on the couch, softly asked if he ever missed his old orderly life, Nicholas glanced around and answered without hesitation, "No, this is the life I want." And in that instant, he understood that the true meaning of family was right there, in the love they chose to live every single day. The end. So what did you think of this story? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep enjoying stories like this one. See you next time.